Hey there, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for our YouTube page. And we're back again, twice in a week. I think you guys need it, and they say that it's a little of a distraction from the chaos that we're living in our world. So glad to have you back. And this segment is going to focus predominantly on a missing girl. And really, it's the case that started it all for me, and the National Park Service and what they've done. So, without further ado, kind of a give back to you guys is Missing 411, my first movie, produced and directed by my son, Ben, and Missing 411, The Hunted. Both of those can be found on YouTube Movies for free. So, Missing 411, that's the title. Title of the second one, Missing 411, The Hunted. The first movie, Missing 411, stars Les Stroud, Survivor Man. And it's predominantly about some kids who disappear in the wilderness. And I've been asked why I did that. And the reason being is I thought that it would be easier for people to understand that there's something unusual happening when these kids have covered phenomenal distances that no parent would say, yeah, my kid could cover that in the woods. And it was more of an awakening for the public. That's why that was number one. Second movie, Missing 411, The Hunted, is about a series of hunters that disappeared. And if you read the comments on the last couple of movies right here on our YouTube channel, you're going to see that it's got very good reviews. So thank you. All of you, I can't tell you the thousands of people who have written me saying that they've been unsubscribed from our channel. So check and see if you have been unsubscribed. Something unusual is happening here. Some direct attacks on us the last few videos that we've uploaded. Give me a thumbs up if you like the movie. I'm not asking for them if you don't, but if you do, give a thumbs up. That means a lot. And it's an indicator to the powers to be that we have some impact here. And the impact is on missing people. Our goal here at this channel is to educate people of what is happening out there. National parks are not a playground. Parents, wake up! National parks are not a playground. Don't let your kids run around there. 99% of the national parks in the United States, you cannot hunt on them. Now, what that really means is that there's a lot of wildlife for predatorial animals. And if there's a lot of wildlife for predatorial animals, it means that mountain lions, bears, etc., like to make that home. And there are a lot of those in national parks. So when you let your kids run free and you're not keeping an eye on them, that's being negligent. And as I've told you many times before, I've been in a national park, found a young child walking a long ways from their parents. The parents could never see him. And they walked up to me and Angie in the woods and, "Hi, how are you?" This kid couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. We were stunned. So, you can watch those two movies, YouTube movies right now. I get a lot of questions, hey, why isn't this movie in that country or this country? It's out of my control. The powers to be at the distributorship for the movies reach agreements with these different countries and these different channels to air the movie. For one reason or another, your country didn't want to air it, or they didn't want to license it, or whatever. So I wish I could help you, but I can't. So today, we're going to talk about a girl that lived in the town next to me when I grew up. I grew up in a town called Cupertino, California, where Apple Computer is today. It's a suburb of San Jose. Upper middle class, really nice town. And right next to us was a very high class town that we could never afford to live in called Saratoga. Saratoga was really nice. And Stacy Aris, 14 years old, grew up in Saratoga. And on July 17th, 1981, her and her dad went up to Yosemite and they booked a trip on horseback by a contractor for the National Park Service to ride into an area, and it's called the High Sierra Camps. That's where they were going to. There were 10 people that were riding on horseback that day, plus the wrangler and guide. They were all on horseback. Well, on July 17th, they stopped at a place called Cathedral Lake. Stopped and had lunch. Everything was good, no issues. They got back up, and later that day they arrived at Sunrise High Sierra Camp. And that's about 3 miles southeast of Tenaya Lake. And Stacy and her dad shared a cabin. And when they arrived there, she went in, took a shower, changed her clothes, and put on some sandals and told her dad that she was going to walk down the trail with a man named Gerald Stewart, 71 years old, and take some pictures with her camera. And her dad stopped her and said, "Stacy, you're in the mountains, you're on trails, no sandals, put on your hiking boots." And she did. And I tell that to you because I want you to think of the frame of mind of a 14-year-old. She's in Yosemite National Park, the most well-known national park probably in the world. And you never hear about anything bad happen in Yosemite. And because of that, Stacy lived a life of blissful ignorance. And probably her dad did too. I don't know. But he allowed her to go off with Gerald Stewart. And they'd gotten to know Gerald, great guy, 71 years old, quite older than Stacy and her dad at the time. They were at a 90-foot 100 elevation. And Stacy and Gerald walked just a short distance. And Gerald told her he had to sit down. He was tired. And they stopped at a place just above Sunrise Lakes. Now at this point, one of the wrangler, Chris Grimes, said he saw Gerald sit down and he saw Stacy walk away. Confirmed. And those two people were the last people to ever see Stacy Aris. Stacy walked down a granite-laden hillside, almost all granite, and walked down to a tree grove that surrounded the lake and disappeared. She told Gerald she was just going to go down there for a few minutes, take some pictures, and be right back. Well, when she didn't return, there was a search by everyone in this party, and on the trail down to the lake, they found the lens cap to her camera, and that's all they ever really found of her. So they called the National Park Service. They got in there right away. They started a search. First, it was a hasty search. Then there was a massive search. And there were 57 hours of helicopter searching. There was a 9-day formal search, hundreds of national park personnel, and support search and rescue groups. They didn't find anything. And it was disastrous to her family. Now, this happened in '81. I first heard about this case in 2009 or 2010. And when I did, because I lived in the Bay Area, I made a search for her parents and I found out that they were deceased. Effectively, this case dropped off everyone's radar. And I know that for a fact. So I filed. Before I go any further, that's the last known picture of Stacy. 14 years old, good girl. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request against the National Park Service, National Park Police, for all documents related to Stacy's case. Now at the time I requested it, the case was 40 years old. 40 years old. Mom and dad were deceased. Gerald was deceased. Essentially all the critical witnesses were gone. Well, I made the request and I got a phone call from our National Parks Special Agent, Stephen Yu, at Yosemite. And one of the first things right out of his mouth is, "Why do you want these reports. So, according to the Freedom of Information Act, it's important you know the law before you start dabbling in this, is the National Park Service and no other government agency can ask that question and use it as a decision maker on whether you get the reports or not. So why would Stephen Yu ask that? Well, I would think it's because he's trying to decide if he's going to give me anything. I told him I was doing research on missing people and I wanted the report. But I also told him, I said, Stephen, that's an inappropriate question according to FOIA guidelines. And he goes, well, I'm not going to use it for anything. I just wanted to know. I said, okay. So right from the beginning, he was not very polite, not very nice. I would say it was probably one of the most rude conversations I've ever had with a law enforcement officer. And I asked him during that call why he was treating me like that. And he didn't respond with a good answer. But at the end of the conversation, when I asked him, I said, Stephen, has anybody even looked at this case file in 20 years? He said, I don't think so. And I asked him, I said, well, are there any suspects? He said, no. I said, is this a criminal investigation? He said, no. It's classified as a missing person case file. No suspects. Criminal case file. No. Missing person case file. Yes. Nobody's looked at it in 20 years. It's a cold case. Nobody cares about it. So let's give it some press. Nope. You're never going to see one page of this file. That was his quote. Now, why would he do that? Why would he talk to me like that? And why would he be restricting access to a file that nobody's looked at for years? To tell you I was pretty pissed would be an understatement. So I also asked him, I said, why isn't this case file on the National Missing and Exploited database for missing kids? He says, it is. I said, no, it's not. And he said, you're a liar. Well, it wasn't. And he asked me why I would think I would be able to get access to an open missing person case file. And I told him, because I have dozens already. He said, you're a liar. I said, Stephen, you know how stupid you sound when you say something like that? He goes, no, the National Park Service doesn't release case files that are open. It's an absolute lie. They do. And I've got some. So this conversation went south bad. Now, not far from where Stacy disappeared is a place called Tenaya, T-E-N-A-Y-A Peak. And on September 8th, 1968, two off-duty San Jose police officers, that's kind of coincidental, that's where I work, found a body in a crevasse up on the side of the mountain. They called in the Park Service and they never did ID that body. Very strange. And then you go to May 25th, 1976, a man named Jeff Estes was disappeared in a place called May Lake. And if you looked on a map, it went Sunrise Lake, Tenaya Lake, May Lake. And they're about 1.5 miles apart. He disappeared and was never found. So this area has a lot of strangeness to it. But more concerning to me is the transparency of the National Park Service police and why I was treated this way. Because if I was treated this way by Stephen Yu, then there's no doubt that you're going to get treated like crap as well. Now, since that time, I had this conversation with him about 9 years ago. I've had conversations with several special agents of the National Park Service. And it's enlightened me greatly as to the ways of the world. I started to make a series of requests on cases in Yosemite, and Yosemite never turned over one case file. Other parks have, Yosemite will not. And what I was told by special agents who have worked at Yosemite is that this is like a monarchy or a dictatorship, even worse, where the superintendent of that park is probably one of the most powerful people below the administration in Washington, D.C. in the Park Service. And whatever they say goes. And the special agents that are assigned by regions, in the Pacific region, their offices are in Yosemite. They've got a building above this garage. All of them sit in these desks really tightly closed together. And when I found out that they weren't going to give me any of these case files, that's when I decided this is going to be a long effort, but I'm going to go into archives. I'll find every case file if I have to. What did I do? I did. And after I wrote in my books about every case of a missing person in Yosemite, guess what happened? Suddenly, a list appears released by the special agents at Yosemite, a list of missing people from Yosemite. That's the only park that's ever released a list that I know about. So that tells me that I have a long way to go to figure out everyone who's missing at all these other parks. But I have figured out Yosemite, I think. There might be more and they aren't saying, I don't know. So each of these districts of the National Park Service, I think there's 5 now, they kind of run across the US. Each one of these has an office of special agents, detectives assigned to them. And they do the follow-up on missing person cases. And they have their case files in their desk. Now, I filed for the National Park Service to release a list of missing people. And when I filed back in 2011, they said, no, we don't have any lists. And if you want a list from Yosemite, it'll be $34,000. 34 grand. And guess what? They came up with it on their own years later. Someone did it. The special agents did it. That's who did it. Because the special agents have all those case files in their desks. And the supervising special agent of each one of those districts, all he has to do is say, hey, ladies and gents, go into your files and make a list of all the open missing person case files you have and send it to me. And then that supervisor puts it on an Excel spreadsheet, ka-ching, done, and publicizes it. Do you think that'd do the families of these missing people some good? They don't want the families to know who else is missing, because a lone family member from one missing person family has no power. A group of them together has power. The Park Service does not want you to know who is missing in their parks, because if you did, you would be irate, especially if it was a family member. They're trying to control the message. And that message is that these parks are dangerous places. 99% of the time, nothing's ever going to happen. But on that 1% of the time, or even less than that, I got to be truthful, it's probably far, far less than 1% of the time. Infinitesimally less. Like 1/10,000th of 1%. Maybe even less go missing. But to those families, it's huge. Huge. The list in Yosemite is over 50 people that have never been found. Now that doesn't count the people that have died under unusual or strange circumstances that I've also written about. So, Stacy. Once Stephen, you denied me access to Stacy's case file, which was 2,000 pages long. I've never seen a case file 2,000 pages long on a missing person from any jurisdiction. So what was so convoluted in this? What were they tracking that they gathered up 2,000 pages? What were they researching? I don't know. But let me go on here. This is an appeals letter that was sent to me after I appealed the decision that I couldn't get the reports. The way the process works is that you send a letter to National Park headquarters, and then they have a National Park employee that decides if their decision was appropriate. Sounds right? Hey? So, let's go through this. So it says, permits the withholding of records, an exemption. Permits the withholding of records of information compiled for law enforcement purposes, but only to the extent that production of such law enforcement records or information could reasonably be expected to interfere with law enforcement proceedings. The exemption is intended to prevent premature disclosure of the investigative materials that might be used in a law enforcement action. Folks, nobody's looked at the file for 20 years. It's not a criminal investigation. You said so. It's a missing person case. There's no crime that occurred. In this case, Congress has given the Secretary of the Interior, head of the national parks, through the NPS Express Law Enforcement Authority to maintain law and order and protect persons or property within areas of the national park system. And the records at issue in the appeal were compiled for this purpose. Therefore, the department concludes that the withheld documents were compiled for law enforcement purposes. This analysis is the most insanely mundane, inadequate explanation to deny access I've ever seen. Let's keep going. Additionally, the National Park Service has advised the department that its criminal investigation into the incident is still ongoing. Lie. 100% lie. Disclosure of the documents at issue in the appeal could reasonably be expected to interfere with law enforcement proceedings because their premature release. Lie. You is either lying or they are lying. Nothing has touched that report in 20 years until I made it public. Disgusting. You should be disgusted. This could be your daughter out there. Lastly, hinder National Park Service's ability to further control and shape the investigation would enable targets of the investigation to elude detection, create defenses, and to suppress, fabricate, or tamper with evidence. Folks, everyone's dead. This happened in 81, folks. Come on. This is complete crap. This is the obstruction that has been happening to our investigations into these type of incidents inside the national parks for years. That's why I'm letting you see this. Further, a review of the withheld materials reveals that there are no non-exempt categories that can be released to you without causing one of the harms to the National Park Service investigations of the incident articulated above. So what they said at the time is that no, we can't release anything in the case file because it could harm it. Now, what happened within a year after this? Son of a gun. The National Park's special agents released documents from the Arras file. And you know what those are that you'll see online? Some pictures that were in the file that said they couldn't release them before, and some news articles. Well, son of a gun. There were things in there to release. I also asked for all of the search and rescue documents, where they searched and how they searched. They said they couldn't release those, and they still haven't. Amazing. So, that just absolutely disgusts the heck out of me, and it gets me fired up when I see this, and it just reminds me how hate-filled this organization can be, and I want to make it clear who I am really mad at. Number one, Stephen Yu for his attitude towards me. But I've talked to other special agents about Mr. Yu, and that conversation will stay between us. But he's known. So Stephen, if we ever meet each other, which I hope we do, I'm sure you'll walk away as a coward that you are, that you're willing to talk to me like that, and let every victim's family know how you treat them. Because this reflects on you, Mr. Yu. The National Park Service, they are great marketers of their product. And what do I mean by that? I want you to look at Stacy while I'm talking, because that's more important than looking at that stupid report. But in the 60s and 70s, the National Park Service went on a huge advertising campaign, which was epic. And they're still doing it through different foundations and things about donate to the foundation, let's improve the parks, let's do this, let's do that. There's never talk into any of these foundations about missing people. And when I've written to them about some publicity for the missing people, they erase my comments and they won't even respond. It's amazing to me. It's disgusting, but it's amazing. Now, when you talk about their marketing campaign, it still has stuck, and you still see a lot of advertisement for national parks, free days, etc. Let's talk about the hierarchy, because that's important. So at the very top of the national parks, you have politicians, and they're the ones in Washington, D.C. They're the ones making policy. They're the ones asking for money. And they're the ones that change up during every administration. And then below that, you have lifetime employees. 24 hours, I should say, they're permanent employees. They work all year, permanent employees of the Park Service. And then below them, you have seasonal employees. And those are the ones that you mostly see in the parks during the summer when you come in and greet you, and they're smiling and they're friendly and they have no idea what's going on. Now, do the full-time employees know? Of course, some of them know. They're not foolish. And the ones that I've interviewed that have contacted me, it can be a disgusting place. I interviewed a man who wrote a book about, quote unquote, the Yosemite Mafia. And I forgot the entire name of the book, but if you go onto Google, go onto Amazon and you type in the Yosemite Mafia, he was a retired special agent, a phenomenal book about how bad the administration treated their employees in Yosemite. So, but many special agents have contacted me, many park rangers have contacted me, and I appreciate that. And because I am a printed author, I would never give you up. So, any whistleblower wants to come in and help us out with this, I guarantee you'll have 100% anonymity and protection. So, keep them coming. I love meeting with you guys and ladies. There have been some ladies too, very nice people. Salt of the earth. And they came to the National Park Service because they believed in the propaganda. And what they found out is it's a very different place. And that is disturbing to me. So, seasonal employees. Then below that, well, actually up above that, in an entirely different arena, is the National Park Service Police. And those are the first responders you see in law enforcement vehicles, National Park Service Police. They're armed. And some of those are seasonal as well. And many of those are also full-time. Now, I interviewed a seasonal National Park Service police officer from Crater Lakes for a book I wrote. And he was a full-time science teacher in a city, and during the summer he went up to Crater Lake with his family and he lived there. Great man, truthful man. And I learned a lot from him. But there's great people in the Park Service, trust me. I've met many of them. And I'm not indicting all of them, but there's a few that are very bad. Now, in the National Park Service Police, after the first responders, you have the administration, and then you also have the special agents. Now, the police are in a different faction of the Park Service than the typical rangers and the seasonal employees and full-time employees that you meet. And there's this friction between those two groups. And I was speaking to a special agent, and he said, yeah, Dave, we were searching for missing people, and we wanted to put a drone up to help search. And the park management said, no, We had to go to Washington to get approval for that. We never did get approval, and the drone never went up. Disgusting. What should we value more than anything in our world? Human life. And if there's a question mark about putting a drone up to possibly save someone's life, the person needs to get their head examined. And I feel for those special agents that are feeling that obstruction from idiotic park management. In our first movie, Missing 411, I did a segment about Crater Lake and about a boy who disappeared there. And I interviewed a sheriff from one of the jurisdictions there that responded to a call from the National Park Service for assistance. And they requested assistance days after this boy disappeared. And this sheriff went in to explain how they can't respond into the national park when someone disappears. They have to be invited. And the sheriff explained that the management in the parks are so paranoid about blowing something out and up when it could be just quietly handled, that rather than saving a boy's life, they never called until it was too late. And this sheriff went on to explain how when a boy's missing, you need every resource there imaginable then. You don't wait days. And he was brutal on him. But I love that sheriff for his honesty. And again, you can watch that movie right now on YouTube movies, titled Missing 411. So search and rescue people just can't go in and search. They have to be invited. And they don't want a lot of people on their property. And therein lies another issue. The perception that lifetime employees of the Park Service have of their property. And it's theirs, trust me. Because most of them live on the property, and it is theirs, and they'll let you know that. And they treat it as such. Rather than ours, they believe it's theirs. And not all of them, trust me, but some of them make it horribly difficult to function in and around them in a working capacity. And I hear about this from the rangers, police officers, and search and rescue people all the time. Now, if you guys tell me something and you say don't say anything, I don't say anything. That's why I'm not telling you a lot about what they tell me. But I need this information to function, so I appreciate it. One other thing. I applied this last year for a permit to film in Yosemite. And I wanted to film Stacy's case. So I know the games that they play, the National Park Service. So I sent an express mail letter with a check with the application to film inside. It's multi-pages. You got to include insurance. You got to include everything. I did. And I made it with a signature required. I waited 3 weeks. I waited 4 weeks. Nothing. Didn't hear anything. I check. Yeah, it was signed for by the national parks at that location where I sent it. I call, leave a message, no response. Leave 3 messages. Finally, somebody calls back and says, oh, we never got it. You never got it. I explained who signed for it, and they said, oh, that's our mail center manager. He signed for it, but we never got it. Okay, so an express mail package comes into the mail center with a signature required, meaning it's probably important, addressed to the film office, and they never get it. Fascinating. How else can you make this work? They said, well, if you could just send us all that material again. I knew stuff like this would happen, so I sent it again. 3, 4, 5 weeks, nothing. Now, to film in these locations at Yosemite, you got to make reservations 9, 10 months ahead of time to get a location to stay during the spring and summer. It's not easy. Again, I hear nothing. So I up the ante. I start calling people inside the park, trying to get to the superintendent to figure out what is happening here. So I get a letter back from an individual named Joe Llewellyn. And if you go to the cannammissing.com website, under current events. If you scroll down, you can read the letter in its entirety, but I'll read it to you right here. I can tell you what we have been doing the last month, managing the park emergency closure and staff stay-at-home orders due to COVID-19. Your novelty film project was not a priority of the National Park Service. I believe our website indicates there's a 30-day process on film applications. I'll also inform you filming permits are a privilege granted entirely at the discretion of the superintendent and park management and not a right. Let's be clear on that. We'll review a revised filming location request based on your application with no staff interviews and get back to you on any revisions we require. We'll need to review the revised filming proposal. We cannot commit to any dates at this time as the park remains closed to public access. How the phased reopening for public health will be managed and those dates we do not know. Unless you are flexible and work according to our schedule, I strongly suggest you look elsewhere to film. Joe Llewellyn, Chief of Land Resources and Special Park Uses. I read that 3 times. And then I sent it to everyone I knew because I couldn't believe Mr. Llewellyn was so rude. Trust me, folks, when I write a letter, I know that's in stone forever, and I'm really polite. That was the rudest letter I've ever gotten from a government agency on anything. It's not a right to film in a park, and it's a privilege granted solely by the superintendent. It's a dictatorship. You go look at the movies that have been made in Yosemite over the time. They also told me on an off conversation that they would never grant a film permit to film in a forested area that wasn't paved and trailed. So, they said the area where Stacy disappeared, they wouldn't grant us access to film there. What? I told them there would only be me and a videographer. Everybody else in the crew would not go because they wouldn't want an impact on the environment. Nope, won't access it. You won't get in. It was one of the most bizarre conversations I've ever had. We may grant you, they said, access to certain parts of the park, but you don't get in there. They're trying to control the information flow. Now, if you look at First Amendment rights and filming and educating and talking for videos, etc., it could be said that I have a First Amendment right to film in there. And I have a First Amendment right to get this message out. But Yosemite does not want you to know. Now, when I sent this to several employees of the Park Service, they were stunned. And they said, the only way Joe would send that message to you is if the superintendent approved it, because the backlash, if he hadn't approved it, would be huge. But here's the problem. If the superintendent approved it, that just shows you how messed up our system is and our government is, specifically the National Park Service, managed by the Department of the Interior. And any thoughts that it's going to get better? I doubt it. But unless we as a group, as a family that are upset about what's happening to missing people, this kind of garbage is going to continue. And that's why I need you and everybody else to take this video and let everybody see it, because it's filled with one thing: facts. I just told you the facts about what happened to me. Will the National Park Service ever allow me into film? I don't know. Now everyone says, oh, just go in there and film, Dave. I can guarantee that if I film, and I could film in there and they'd never know, but as soon as it went up and it was produced and it was seen by millions of people, the Park Service and government attorneys would file an injunction, shut the film down, take 100% control of it, and then force me to go to court to get it back. But I couldn't because it was done criminally, because I didn't have a permit. That's why I need a really good First Amendment attorney, a really good attorney that is protective of our rights. And somebody needs to reform the Park Service and their mundane, archaic rules. They're filled with rules that are meant to control the message. Ken Burns has made some of the best films in the world, some of them in our national parks. And he had access to areas that they'd never allow me to film in. But why did they give him the access? They gave him the access because he's sending a message that they want out there. They won't give me the access because they don't want you to know and see the areas where these people disappeared in. So friends, thank you for listening to me today. And if the National Park Service gets all torqued about this, I don't care. We're going to get the message out one way or another. And through either the help of you in mass writing of letters to the Park Service saying this is insane, you need to stop this, writing to your congressman and telling them this is insane and they need to stop it, and telling them that they need to make missing people a priority in their world, even if they're afraid that it's going to impact their attendance. Families need to know. So thank you, and I appreciate the support, and have a good week.